What's up everyone, happy Friday, welcome back to the channel. Have some more Rebel Moon stuff to talk about today. I know it's been a lot of Rebel Moon stuff over the past several weeks, but stuff has been continuing to come out even after the movie was released. Today I want to share some details that came from a Hollywood Reporter article to give us an idea of what to expect from part 2, the director's cuts, especially director's cut part 1, and some updates on when we can expect maybe at least the director's cut for part 1 to be released. So if you're new to the channel, thank you for checking it out. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave if you enjoy my content. And let's go ahead and get into a quick, just gonna share some highlights from this article. So this was an interview with the co-writer Kurt Johnstad. They worked together on other projects such as 300 and kind of were separate, then came back together, worked on their own stuff, came back together, and would always talk about Rebel Moon. Well, back then they called it the 5, as he shares in the article, that Zack first brought up this idea in 1997 to him, and then over the years, as they would either work together or be working on their own stuff, it would come up in discussion. And so Zack called him back when he was working on finishing up Army of the Dead for Netflix and told him, I think I need to do another movie for Netflix, so do you think we could revisit this? And then that's how they got back together to work on Rebel Moon. He also shares some information about kind of the decision to have a PG-13 version and a rated R director's cut version, so I'm going to share that as well. So first of all, I want to share this update because I mentioned it again in my video from yesterday. I was hoping, and there's been I think some confusion about when the director's cut, the R-rated version, extended version, is going to be released for part 1, A Child of Fire, and I think some of us might have been thinking that it was going to come out before part 2, which is what I was really hoping for, but the article mentions that, you might have noticed recently that Zack was on the Film Junkies YouTube stream, and during that stream, Zack said it will not come out before part 2. They're kind of working on the director's cuts and part 2 all at the same time, and so there's a lot for them to finish and to get done, and a lot for them to work on. So we're most likely not going to get the director's cut of part 1 before part 2 comes out in April. They really have to focus on finishing part 2 to come out in April, and they're also working on both director's cuts. So I know it kind of sucks, but we're getting part 2 in April, which is exciting. Maybe summer, hopefully. I hope it's not later than the summertime. That's already feels long to me to wait, but we still have a lot to look forward to, and at least we know that we have a lot to look forward to, and that's exciting. So in a nutshell, for what to expect from the director's cut, Kurt Johnstad says there's definitely a lot more story at the front of the movie. You're definitely going to get a lot more of Jimmy and see his arc. You're going to get a lot more of Cora and the Mother World. You're going to get a different introduction to Noble. You're also going to get a different introduction to some smaller characters like Eris, played by Sky Yang, who's the Motherworld soldier that defends the character of Sam. If you've seen part 1, then you probably know who I'm talking about. There's like a young soldier who's trying to help Sam he's trying to protect her from being, assaulted by these other Motherworld soldiers that are there. And so we'll get more of his story and kind of how he ended up in the position that he's in, because you can tell that he's not, he's kind of doing this against his will, it seemed like to me. So we'll get more information on how that happened. In broad brushstrokes, there's more character, and certainly knowing Zack, there's more action and spectacle and the visual vibrance of what he does. So there just wasn't enough time. It would have been a 4-hour PG-13 movie. So, they really had to try to do their best to really keep what they felt was most important for this version of the movie. Going on to having a shorter PG-13 version as well as a rated R extended cut, he mentions that it's really a business decision made with the perspective of wanting to include a younger, like teenage audience without having as much, parental restrictions that would be placed on the extended rated R version. That kind of gives some clarification on that issue as well, because I think a lot of us fans have wondered why they wouldn't just release the longer rated R version without having this one first. And so that kind of provides some insight into how that decision was made. As a follow-up to that, the question was asked, was Zack conflicted at all from what you could tell? But Kurt Johnstad mentions that he wasn't in those meetings, so he can't really speak with confidence on how those decisions were made. He says the long draft that became 2 movies was always the Zack Snyder draft, and I could call that the extended version draft, so we ended up filming all of that. It's not like he went back and did reshoots to do an extended version. That didn't happen. Everything that was in the 153 days of shooting was in the extended version of the script at some point. There was a business decision of how can we have more eyes? How can we have more people experience this? And that's just part of Hollywood. People make these decisions all the time. So we really had our eyes on 4 drafts because in a lot of ways we were shooting 4 movies at once. It's not just 2 movies. There are line reads and dialogue and little references and the nuances of how hard an action scene can go for PG-13 versus R. So everybody kept a multitude of plates in the air, but nobody had as many as Zack. I still don't know how he does it, but it's impressive to watch. So kind of, you know, explaining how they went about this process is that they shot everything in those 153 days, and that includes part 2 and the director's cut for part 2. Everything has been filmed all in that time frame. They didn't shoot the PG-13 versions and then go back and add, you know, sequences or scenes or dialogue to add in for the extended version. They shot everything. There is a cliffhanger and plot twist in part 1. So the question is, what was the thought process behind that swerve of that plot twist, right? And he said that we knew we needed a cliffhanger to create an energy and an appetite for more. We also knew that we were filming both films back to back, and so people weren't going to have to wait 3 years, you know, to see what's going to happen. They're not going to lose their minds or lose interest because the window is only 4 months. In April, they're going to get the answers to movie 1, so we knew we needed something to change the attitude of the characters and also change the attitude and the experience of the audience in a big way. There are a couple of things that happen at the end of the movie 1 that definitely get you to sit up in your seat and go, wait a second, what just happened? And that's like the exact thing that literally is exactly what I did and said when that plot twist happened in part 1. And that launches the next band of outsiders or rebels, and it sends them on to movie 2. But this question is, how does part 2 compare to part 1? Does it feel like its own movie with a different engine and tone? He said that I would say it's definitely its own movie, and it's a very different movie. It's not an assembly of the team. That's what we got in the first movie, right? The team is built, and now it's why they fight. I think the PG-13 cut is 2 hours or maybe more, but it's a non-stop action roller coaster ride of twists and turns, and the ending is spectacular. We hope things are going to turn out the way they do, but it's a fantastic, fun ride that's very different than part 1. And Ed Skrein, who plays Admiral Noble, also had an interview with the Hollywood Reporter, and he kind of echoed some of the things that were brought up here in this article, talking about his character, that we have a different type of introduction to his character. So in part 1, the first time we see him is when they land on the village in Velt, and he confronts them. In the extended cut, in the director's cut, the beginning of the movie is a lot more about the Mother World, Admiral Noble, the Imperium, you know, the royal family. We get a lot more of that in the beginning of the movie, and so we see him before that scene on Velt when he goes to the village. So that's going to be like the second time that we actually see him in the director's cut. And he kind of talks about some interesting things with Admiral Noble and his technology, you know, some of the interesting scenes that they did with his character in the director's cut. So overall, it seems like the director's cut's going to provide a lot more backstory, a lot more character stories. I think as well as part 2, we're going to get, you know, flashback scenes of pretty much like each character as they kind of tell their story of how they ended up where they are, why they all kind of have their own reason for fighting against the Mother World. So we're going to get more of that in part 2 as well as in the director's cuts. So I'm really looking forward to all of that. And Zack also shared a picture from the director's cut of Jimmy, and he says, Jimmy apart from the world, and then we see on the ground there it looks like, you know, a deer of some kind, well, whatever kind of creature this is on Velt that looks similar to, it has antlers. And, you know, I wondered how he got them in part 1, because we see him with the antlers at the end when Cora and the team return to the village. And so it looks like we might see that in the director's cut, and we see how he decides, or, you know, how he decides to put that on his head. Because I think he's a very interesting, it's an interesting look for a robot character, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of him as well, which we will in the director's cut and in part 2. But all of the characters, I really want to see more of them. It's kind of nice to have a little bit of insight and clarification as to why they decided to have PG-13 versions and, you know, rated R director's cut versions. But at least we know all of that's coming, and that's a good feeling. So wanted to share those details. If you want to see the other questions that were covered, you can read the entire article on Hollywood Reporter, as well as the one with Ed Skrein. So thank you guys for watching. Check out anything you might have missed recently, and if you are interested in the short section on my channel, you can visit that as well. But thank you guys for the support. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.